I found out about the inheritance on a Tuesday morning, the kind that smelled like rain and old paper. My mother had been gone only 3 weeks. I was still waking up expecting her to call, still keeping her sea blue scarf draped over the dining chair because her perfume lingered there. Before continuing with the story, thank you for coming here. For more stories, please subscribe to the channel. And please mention where you listened to it in the comments. Thank you. When the attorney slid the folder across the glossy table, my hands shook. Not because of the money, but because her handwriting, those tight, tidy curves, appeared on the final page. A note. A goodbye. A reminder to stay gentle, but don't let anyone take what you've built. I cried in the car for almost an hour. When I finally drove home, my husband, Daniel, was waiting in the kitchen. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask how it went. He only asked, "So, did she leave you anything substantial?" His tone was off. Too casual. Too prepared. I told him the truth. Yes, she had left me everything. I didn't tell him the amount, and he didn't ask. He only nodded, muttered something about good to know, and left the room. That night, I couldn't shake a strange chill. His distance wasn't new. Marriage can get quiet, but something felt like a door quietly closing behind me. 2 days later, I came home to a manila envelope on the coffee table. Divorce papers. I stood there, jacket still on, key still in my hand, staring at my name typed in cold block letters. My chest tightened, not with heartbreak, but disbelief. My mother wasn't even buried in full peace, and he was already packing up the life we'd built. When Daniel walked in, he didn't even look ashamed. Just inconvenienced. "It's for the best," he said, shrugging like he was canceling a subscription. "We've been drifting for years. And look, the timing works out. You're in a better place financially now, so it won't hit you as hard." I felt something inside me solidify. Like a sheet of glass snapping cleanly in two. "So you waited," I said softly, "until after my mother died." He bristled. "Don't make it emotional. This is practical." Practical. He kept using that word as if it made the betrayal bureaucratic instead of personal. He expected me to sign immediately. He expected me to crumble, to mourn quietly while he calculated his share. What he didn't expect was that I'd learned to plan 10 steps ahead from the woman who raised me. The sea blue scarf was still draped over the chair. I touched it, breathed in its scent, and made a silent promise. If he insisted on a war, I would win without raising my voice. And I already knew exactly where to start. The next morning, I poured coffee into my chipped mug, the one my mother bought me when I got my first promotion, the one Daniel always said looked too old and too sentimental. Today it felt like armor. I wrapped both hands around it, grounding myself as I stared at the divorce papers spread across the dining table. I have negotiated 8-figure contracts without blinking. But seeing Daniel's signature printed beneath the words "irreconcilable differences" made my stomach twist. Not because I wanted him back, those days had quietly expired long before the inheritance, but because the timing was a red flag waving in my face. He wanted something. And he'd counted on me being too grief-stricken to notice. I found him in the living room, stuffing clothes into a suitcase like he was late for a flight. "You're leaving today?" I asked. He didn't even turn. "It's easier. Clean break." "Clean," I repeated, letting the word sit on my tongue. "Is that what this is?" He finally looked at me, expression flat. "I'm not the villain here, Rachel. People grow apart." True. People do. But villains also tend to narrate themselves as victims. As he zipped up his suitcase, his phone buzzed. I wasn't snooping, he left it face up on the sofa. A preview flashed across the screen. "Sienna, did you tell her yet? Once she signs, we can finally move on the house." Mom's so relieved. A cold pulse went through me. Sienna was his sister. His mother had never liked me, too career-focused, too independent, too unwilling to let them manage my finances like they did with the rest of their family. And now they were talking about my house? Daniel froze when he saw me reading the notification. He grabbed the phone too quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Don't read into that. Into what? I asked evenly. Your family planning something with my property? He exhaled sharply, as if I were being unreasonable. We're trying to help you. You can't maintain this place alone. It's too big, too expensive. We were thinking you could move in with Mom for a while. She has space. I stared at him. And the house? I asked. A hesitation. Tiny, but loud. We'd manage it for you. Manage. Meaning control. Meaning sell. Meaning profit. My mother's scarf brushed against my arm as I folded it over the back of a chair. I'd kept it near the table ever since she died, and now I found myself touching it like a steadying hand. Daniel, I said softly, is this why you filed? So you could access the equity? He scoffed. Don't be dramatic. This is about us. The house situation is separate. I wanted to laugh. He truly thought I was the same naive, accommodating wife he'd married at 27. Back then, I'd believed partnership meant trust. Turns out, trust was a currency he'd been trading behind my back. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. My lawyer says the sooner you sign, the better it is for both of us. Let's not drag this out. He left without looking back. The house fell silent, except for the faint rustle of the scarf as the morning breeze reached it. My mother always said, listen to what people don't say. Daniel hadn't asked a single question about the inheritance beyond the first day. He hadn't shown a scrap of emotion. He hadn't expressed regret, guilt, or sorrow. He was acting like a man who believed he had already won. I wiped the counter slowly, letting my mind click into strategy mode. Every real estate document in this house was under my name alone. My mother had insisted on that when she helped us with the down payment. She never trusted Daniel's family's hunger for management roles. Still, something didn't sit right. I went to the home office and pulled out the folder where the deed was stored. I'd read it years ago, but grief makes details hazy, and I wanted to see it fresh. And there, on the fourth page, barely noticeable unless you knew to look, was the clause my mother had quietly inserted when she assisted with the purchase. In the event of marital dissolution, claim to this property shall remain solely with the inheriting party. No current or future spouse shall obtain legal or financial interest. My mother's attorney friend had notarized it. Ironclad. Unshakable. I leaned back in the chair, breath shaking, but not from fear. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the glow from my laptop still burning behind my eyes. The time-stamped messages, the plans, the tone, they weren't vague or speculative. They were deliberate. Daniel's mother, Judith, had typed them like she was planning a charity event, not dismantling my life. Lines like once she signs, Sienna can move into the master. Daniel can handle transferring utilities, and Rachel is too sentimental about that house, she won't resist if we frame it as helping her heal. They counted on my grief. My softness. My exhaustion. They did not count on me reading every file. By sunrise, the sea blue scarf was folded beside me like a witness, and the chipped mug sat on my bedside table, half full of cold coffee, the rim smudged where my thumb had traced its crack over and over. At 8:03 a.m., my doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I checked the camera feed, not the family, no. Daniel was too cowardly to face me this early. It was his sister, Sienna. She stood on the porch in oversized sunglasses, hair perfectly smooth, carrying a kindness casserole, the kind of dish meant to create an artificial sense of obligation. She was smiling, but it was the thin, sour smile of someone hiding sharpness behind gloss. When I opened the door, she stepped inside without waiting. "Rachel, honey, I came to check on you," she said, voice thick with false warmth. "We know this divorce is sudden. Daniel is a mess. Mom is heartbroken. We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I repeated, locking the door behind her. She placed the casserole on the counter like she was claiming territory. Then she began the performance. You're grieving. You're overwhelmed. This house is a lot to manage. Mom thought maybe you'd feel safer with her for a while. And we can take this off your plate. This? I asked. She gestured vaguely around the kitchen. The property. All the paperwork. It's too much for one woman struggling, emotionally. There it was. The script. I crossed my arms. Struggling emotionally, I repeated slowly, watching the words tighten her posture. It's nothing to be ashamed of, she cooed. But dragging out a divorce while handling an inheritance and a house, honestly, Rachel, it's a recipe for disaster. You should sign and let us handle the rest. Not us. Us. I felt the moral of this entire mess pressing on me, boundaries. Consent. They thought my life was a committee project. Did Daniel ask you to come? I asked. No. Of course not. This is my choice, she said, picking at her manicure. We're family. Or, well, were. The slip was telling. I poured myself water, deliberately picking up my chipped mug instead of a glass. I watched her eyes land on the crack, the discoloration, the imperfection she had mocked for years. You know, she said lightly, Mom thinks the house would sell quickly. It would be a clean way to end things. You could even give Daniel a small portion as a thank you. I set the mug down a little too firmly. A thank you, I said. For filing for divorce the day after my mother's estate meeting? Sienna smirked. He didn't know the amount. He's just done. Money has nothing to do with it. She lied too easily. They all did. I leaned on the counter. Sienna, I saw the messages. Her jaw locked. What messages? The folder. The planning. The discussion about rooms, utilities, equity, and timing the divorce for the inheritance. A flush crept up her neck. You weren't supposed to see that, she said, and then tried to backtrack. I mean, I don't know what you think you saw, but... Don't bother, I said. I know everything. Silence. She pressed her lips together, recalculating. She switched tactics. Look, Rachel, if you fight this, it'll get ugly. Courts are slow. Daniel's lawyer is aggressive. You don't want your mother's legacy tangled in a long battle. I stepped closer. Calm. Controlled. You don't get to speak about my mother. Her eyes flickered. She took a small step back. Right then, she knew. I wasn't the grieving daughter curled on the couch anymore. I was the woman my mother raised, smart, strategic, observant. And she had walked into my home with a casserole and a script that no longer worked. We were trying to help you, she muttered weakly. No, I said, picking up the casserole and placing it back in her hands. You were trying to move in. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. And here's the thing, I continued, lowering my voice. The deed is ironclad. Notarist. With a dissolution clause that leaves the house 100% mine. Daniel gets nothing. You get nothing. And you can tell your mother that pretending this is about my well-being isn't fooling anyone. The color drained from her face. You're making a mistake, she whispered. I smiled, calm, steady, resolved. No. I'm correcting one. I opened the door. She hesitated for a moment, clutching the dish like a shield, then walked out. As soon as she was off the porch, I locked the door and exhaled. I knew Daniel would come next. Or his lawyer. Or Judith. They would throw new tactics at me. But I had something they didn't know yet. The deed wasn't the only protection. The cloud folder wasn't the only evidence. I had something stronger, something they'd given me without realizing it. Time-stamped records. Proof of intent. A pattern documented in their own words. And I knew exactly how to use it. Daniel showed up 2 days later, right on schedule. Manipulators are predictable, they disappear long enough to let their accomplices soften the target, then return to reasonably sweep up the pieces. Only this time, I wasn't a piece. I was ready. He walked into the house like he still lived there, like the divorce papers were a formality, like I'd obediently await instructions. His attempt at a sympathetic face was almost insulting. "Rachel," he sighed, setting his keys on the counter. "We need to talk. This tension isn't healthy." I sat calmly on the sofa, the deed folder on the coffee table, my chipped mug beside it, steaming. My mother's sea blue scarf lay across the armrest. A quiet witness. "Let's talk, then," I said. Daniel eased into the armchair across from me, pretending confidence. He folded his hands, like he was the reasonable one mediating chaos. "I know you're hurt," he began gently, "and I know the timing looks unfortunate. But I want this to be amicable. For both of us." "Define amicable," I said. He exhaled dramatically, leaning forward. "You keep the inheritance. I keep the house." A beat of silence. I blinked slowly. "The house?" He nodded, as if proposing something neutral. "It's a burden for you. Too big. Too many memories. You'll start fresh, and I'll handle the property issues." "It's fair." "Fair," I repeated. "Why?" "Because," he said, rubbing his chest in feigned frustration, "I've already been talking to a realtor. There are responsibilities, liens, utilities. You don't need that stress." My pulse didn't spike. My voice didn't rise. I'd expected this exact script. "What liens?" I asked. He stilled. Just half a second. Just enough. I smiled faintly. "There are no liens, Daniel." I checked. He straightened. "Well, maybe not yet. But things happen when." "No," I said gently. "Things don't happen. They're planned." His throat flexed. "Rachel, why are you being combative? I'm offering you an easier path. By taking the house my mother helped us buy?" His jaw tightened, irritation cracking through the varnish. "Your mother didn't own the house." "We do. It's marital property." I slid the deed folder toward him. "Read page 4, I said. He frowned but opened it. His eyes scanned the text. Then stopped. Then widened. "That clause isn't enforceable," he muttered. "It's notarized," I said. "It's still legally binding," I finished. He closed the folder too hard. The sound echoed. "You can challenge it," he insisted. "You can try," I said. "But your lawyer will tell you not to. Because there's more." He froze. I picked up my laptop and turned it toward him. The cloud folder was open. Every message neatly arranged. The room changed. It felt like the air itself held still. "Rachel," he said sharply, "that's private." "You shared these files with your mother and sister," I replied. "They're not private." His eyes darted across the screen, recognizing every timestamp. "Judith, time it right. After probate. Sienna, she won't fight it. She's too tired. Daniel, we'll sell the house quickly. She doesn't need to know the plan yet. Judith, your marriage is done anyway. Don't waste time." He stood abruptly. "You're twisting this." "I'm quoting it." "That's not," he stopped, breath quickening. "Okay, yes, we discussed the house. But you're overreacting. My family was worried about you." I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into the folder and took out one more document. A notarized affidavit, completed by my mother's attorney friend, dated the day we signed the deed. I placed it on top. Daniel stared at it like it was a knife. That, I said softly, states that my mother added the clause because she believed you might someday try to leverage the property against me. She wrote that this house was meant to remain mine, exclusively. Daniel swallowed hard. His arrogance was dissolving fast. I'm not the bad guy, he said weakly. My family just wanted stability. And you've been distant. This marriage has been dead for a long time. So dead, I said, that you waited until after my inheritance meeting to file for divorce. He glared. I'm entitled to half of what was acquired during the marriage. The inheritance wasn't acquired, I reminded him. It was left. And your own lawyer knows you have no claim. He paced, hands in his hair. Rachel, stop. Please. You're going to make this harder than it needs to be. I tilted my head. For whom? He didn't answer. After a full minute of frantic silence, he dropped into the chair again, defeated. Fine. What do you want? I picked up my mug, took a slow sip, and met his eyes. I want an uncontested divorce, I said. No claims. No property division. No spousal support. You walk away clean. His eyebrows shot up. You can't be serious. You have two choices, I said calmly. Sign the uncontested agreement, today, and I won't bring up the cloud folder in court. He paled. Or, I continued, we let a judge see every single time-stamped conversation demonstrating intent to manipulate marital assets. You wouldn't, he whispered. I've already saved backups, I said. Silence swallowed the room. He knew I meant it. And for the first time since he filed for divorce, I saw fear, not for losing me, but for losing leverage, reputation, access, control. Finally, he sank back and closed his eyes. What do I get? He asked quietly. Your dignity, I said. If you sign. The clock ticked behind us. Outside, a dog barked. Inside, Daniel's world shrank to the space between us and the documents he'd never expected me to read. I need time, he said. You have until tomorrow. He stared at me, at the woman he thought grief had made weak. He didn't understand yet. Grief had made me precise. Daniel didn't come back the next day. Of course he didn't. Men like him never make a choice while the ground is still shaking. They wait until they're convinced they can salvage some advantage. Manipulators hate deadlines unless they chose them. I gave him until sunset. At 8:14 p.m., long after dusk, long after I'd brewed chamomile tea in my chipped mug and wrapped my mother's sea blue scarf around my shoulders like a shield, I got the text. Daniel, we need to talk. I'm coming over. Not can we talk? Not is this a good time? Just the familiar assertion of dominance. I didn't reply. The doorbell rang 15 minutes later. When I opened the door, Daniel stepped inside with the forced gravitas of a man who had practiced his speech in the car. Behind him, headlights lingered on the street, his mother's SUV parked one house down. Of course Judith was here. Not inside, but close enough to snatch victory if Daniel stumbled. He looked exhausted, but not humbled. No, this was the look of someone who believed he'd found a loophole since our last conversation. Let's sit, I said, motioning to the living room. He didn't sit. He began pacing instead, short, jagged lines across the rug, the way he always did when preparing a performance. Rachel, he started, voice low, I think you're making a mistake pushing this. Divorce doesn't have to be adversarial. I spoke with my lawyer. There might be a way for both of us to walk away with something. Something? I repeated. You keep your inheritance. I get a share of the house. A small portion. Fair. I raised an eyebrow. Fair, according to whom? His voice sharpened. I contributed. I lived here. The marriage. Read the deed again, I said. I did, he snapped. It's not enforceable. My lawyer says. Your lawyer, I said softly, has not seen the notarized affidavit. Nor the conversations in the cloud folder. His breath faltered. I leaned back, letting the silence sit between us like a wall. Then the doorbell rang. Daniel closed his eyes in annoyance. It's Mom. She's worried. Let her in. No, I said. He blinked, startled. Rachel, don't be petty. I'm not being petty, I said. I'm establishing boundaries. Something your family has never respected. The bell rang again, longer this time. Impatient. Daniel massaged his temple, then attempted a tone I'd once mistaken for sincerity. Please. Just let her. No, I repeated, standing. This conversation is between you and me. I walked to the door, cracked it open just 1 inch, and spoke through the gap. Judith, this is not your house. You are not part of this discussion. Please leave. Her voice, sharp and honeyed, cut through the gap. I'm only here to help, Rachel. You are clearly overwhelmed. I closed the door. Behind me, Daniel muttered, unbelievable. Yes, I said, turning back to him. It is. He resumed pacing, but the rhythm shifted, less confident, more frantic. I sat, folding the sea blue scarf neatly in my lap. Daniel, you have a choice, uncontested divorce with a clean break, or a court case with evidence. He stopped pacing. What evidence? I tapped my laptop. He swallowed. You downloaded everything? Everything. He stared at the floor, chewing the inside of his cheek, a tale from our early years, when he used to prepare for presentations. He was calculating how much damage I could do. Whether his mother's messages would tarnish their respectable facade. Whether Sienna's comments looked like coercion. Whether a judge would see intent to manipulate marital assets. He glanced toward the front door, as if seeking rescue. There was none. Finally, his shoulders slumped. If I sign, I walk away with nothing. You walk away with your freedom, I said. And your reputation intact. His voice cracked. Rachel. I can't start over like that. I held his gaze. I did. His expression shifted. Something bitter, tangled, resentful. Your mother gave you money, he hissed. And your family tried to take my home, I said. He fell silent. The lights from Judith's SUV glowed faintly through the curtains, a silent, anxious witness. Let's talk terms, he said finally. I slid the agreement toward him. These are the terms. He scanned the document. His eyes hardened when he reached the line item. Daniel Caldwell waives all rights to property, assets, and spousal support. Divorce to be finalized uncontested. You're ruthless, he muttered. No, I said softly. I'm done being a target. His jaw flexed. He reached into his coat, pulled out a pen, and hesitated. You forced my hand, he whispered. No, I said. You filed for divorce the day after I inherited my mother's estate. You forced your own hand. He signed. It was anticlimactic, the way big betrayals often end. Not with screaming. Not with glass shattering. Just ink drying on paper. I collected the document. He waited for me to say something, offer closure, maybe, or sentiment. I didn't. Now what? He asked hollowly. Now, I said, you leave. He stood there for a moment, absorbing the finality. Then he walked to the door, shoulders hunched, opened it. And froze. Judith was standing on the porch with Sienna behind her, faces tight with expectation. Daniel didn't say a word. He simply walked past them without looking back. Judith stepped forward. Rachel, this is absurd. He deserves. I closed the door. Then I locked it. And for the first time in weeks, the house felt mine again. I placed my mother's scarf on the chair she always preferred when she visited, and took a long sip from my chipped mug. Tomorrow, the legal filings would begin. But tonight? Tonight, I slept without fear. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, grief doesn't evaporate, but steadier, as if the ground beneath me had finally stopped trying to tilt. I made coffee in my chipped mug, wrapped the sea blue scarf around my shoulders, and watched the sunrise through the kitchen window. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Mine. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was an email from Daniel's lawyer, confirming receipt of the signed uncontested divorce agreement. No conditions. No claims. No financial demands. Just one line in the attorney's clipped professionalism. Mr. Caldwell will not be pursuing further action. A simple sentence with an ocean of defeat behind it. I expected that to be the end, clean, clinical, complete. But Daniel's family doesn't surrender quietly. Not when entitlement has been their native language for decades. By noon, someone knocked on my door. 3 sharp raps. Impatient. Familiar. I opened it halfway. Judith stood there in a fitted cream coat, hands clutched around a leather folder. Her expression was taut, controlled rage under the guise of maternal concern. Behind her, Sienna lingered at the edge of the porch, arms crossed like a guard dog. "Rachel," Judith said sharply. "We need to discuss the divorce." Daniel is distraught. "No," I said. "We don't." She blinked as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "Excuse me?" "We don't need to discuss anything," I repeated. "It's finalized." Her nostrils flared. "I raised that boy. I know when something is wrong." "He signed under." "Under the weight of his own choices," I said. "Not mine." She stepped closer. "This is unfair." I leaned against the doorframe calmly. "You planned my eviction." Her lips parted, offended, but not surprised. "That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said evenly. "The timestamps say otherwise." That made her freeze. The timestamped messages. The cloud folder. The written intent. She knew I had read everything. She squared her shoulders. "Daniel deserves some compensation after giving you the best years of his life. No shame. No hesitation. Just expectation." I opened the door wider, letting her see the dining table behind me. Her eyes landed on something she recognized, spread neatly across the wood, copies of the deed clause, the notary's affidavit, printouts of every file from the cloud folder. A curated exhibition of truth. "If Daniel tries to reopen the divorce," I said softly, "these go directly to the court." Sienna took a step back. Judith's face shifted, not defeated, but calculating. She dropped her voice. "You would throw away our family like that? Your family tried to take my home." Judith swallowed hard. "He filed in a moment of weakness." "His timing was perfect," I said. "Just like you planned." The porch fell silent. Finally, Judith spoke through clenched teeth. "You think you've won. But this isn't over. He will recover, and he will remember how you treated him." I offered a soft, sad smile. "I hope he does. Maybe then he'll finally learn accountability." She stared at me for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned sharply and strode down the steps. Sienna followed like a shadow. When their SUV pulled away, the street exhaled. I closed the door. Locked it. Rested my forehead against the wood for a moment. Then I inhaled deeply and walked back to the table. I gathered the papers, slid them neatly into a drawer, and let my fingers rest on the sea blue scarf draped across the chair. My mother had once told me, "Respect isn't about being liked. It's about holding your boundaries even when it's inconvenient." She would have been proud. The next weeks unfolded in quiet, simple victories. The divorce processed quickly. Daniel didn't contest a single line. He moved out of state with no forwarding address, an escape, not a fresh start. His mother stopped sending casserole check-ins. Sienna unfollowed me on social media with a dramatic flourish that felt more like relief than spite. The house, my house, became a sanctuary again. I repainted the guest room, the one they'd planned to convert into Sienna's room, and turned it into a reading nook. I donated the old couch Daniel insisted on keeping. I hung up my mother's scarf in a shadow box in the hallway, a quiet tribute. And one afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I found something tucked inside an old storage bin, a sealed envelope with my mother's handwriting. I sat on the floor, heart pounding as I opened it. If you're reading this, something has changed. Don't doubt yourself. You're stronger than you think. And you already know what to do when people show you who they are. She must have written it years ago, not knowing when I'd need it. But I needed it now. I placed the note in the shadow box beside the scarf. Later that night, as I stood in the doorway of the house Daniel's family tried to seize, I felt a calm pride settle in my chest. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't broken. I hadn't fought dirty. I'd simply held the truth up to the light. And the truth did what it always does. It returned everything to where it belonged.